Hello, it's Rashmir here. In this short video, I'm just going to share a few suggestions on ways that you can overcome, and I say that hesitatingly, and you'll understand why when I share the suggestions. But anyway, overcome an overactive mind being a barrier to spending more time in silence. Now, I'm going to share a bunch of suggestions, and as I share, don't try and capture them all or list them all out. Just relax and listen for the one or two that really resonate with you, that feel like they are doable or tryable, and make a note of those so that you can experiment with those. Brilliant. So, a couple of suggestions. The first is stop worrying about your overactive mind, because worrying is often a form of thinking, right? So if you can, as best you can, let go of the worry and get curious. So start to get curious about, well, what are the thoughts going through my mind? Watch them, observe them, note the way they shift and change, note the directions they're taking you in. Maybe even listen and say, what voice is that? Whose voice is that I'm hearing, right? So that curiosity just allows you to shift into observer mode. And that may sound like it's work and effort and detracting from silence, but actually it's allowing you to slowly let go, play with it, see what happens. And you might find that you naturally start to sense into and feel into silence because you're switching into observer mode. So that's the second suggestion then, is actually see if you can shift into the observer of yourself. And that's very similar to the first suggestion, but there's a subtle difference in it because you might not need to watch the thoughts to get there. You might, especially if you're an experienced meditator, quite easily and quickly be able to shift into observer mode. So the third thing is another variation on this theme, right? It's not, the key here is not trying to shut the mind off. That's asking for trouble. That's not just an impossible job. It's also actually more likely to stimulate the mind. So let go of the idea of shutting the mind off and instead put the mind to work. And you can do that in a few different ways. So listening to silence is one example of that. Get curious about silence. What are the sounds that you're hearing in your silentscape? You know, where are the pauses in the noise if you don't have a silentscape, if you're in a very noisy place? Listen for the pauses between the sounds. Listen to the high notes and to the low notes. See if you can distill nature. See if you can distill a deeper undertone of whether it's silence or energy or however you want to describe it, but essentially get curious and listen in at a deeper level. Another way to put your mind to work, of course, is to actively reflect, because spending time in silence isn't necessarily about doing nothing. You could instead choose to use a moment of silence for conscious reflection. And so put the mind to work by reflecting on something that is of interest to you, or maybe ask yourself a question and then just listen. And yes, the mind might wander, but that's okay. Gently catch it. When you catch it, come back to the exercise. That's the practice, right? Of just being still, of being silent. Or come back to the reflection. Go back to what was the question I was asking about again? And then drop back into listening. And don't worry if you have to do that 5 or 6 times. It really doesn't matter. When you catch yourself, just come back to whatever it is that you are putting your mind to work on. What are some other ways? So I've talked about listening to the sounds and the spaces between the sounds, but another thing to do, especially if you're in a place with other people and there's a lot of conversation going on, see if you can tune into the spaces between the words, and do it now as you're watching this video, for example. How much space am I leaving between words or between sounds? So that starts to just allow you to tune into the gaps. And you can do that visually as well, right? That doesn't just have to be with words. When you're in a place, look for the blank spaces rather than for the forms, which is what we all tend to focus on with our very visual, overstimulated minds. Where are the blanks? What's the scape on which sights or sounds are based? That's just about shifting perspective. There's a Japanese word for this that's completely escaping me at the moment, but it's a really lovely practice of really being more aware of the negative space or the negative soundscape. So just a couple of other things. Humor is a great way to kind of calm and settle the mind, right? So if you catch your mind drifting off, be gentle and humorful with yourself and say, for example, gosh, here I go again, and that just allows a level of relaxation and dropping then back into quiet and stillness. And one final tip for today, well, two final tips actually. One, so when we've got a very overactive mind and we're very focused on our overactive minds, we are in our heads, our awareness is in our heads, our attention is in our heads, and probably we're imbalanced at in this location. So recognize it, take a deep breath, and then drop back into your body. And if you play with your attention, you'll find you'll be able to just gently move your attention either into a part of your physical body, or a lovely place to bring it is into your heart. And doing that, you'll start to just slow down and soften and more easily drop into silence. And don't worry if you have to do that several times. Catch it every time you catch yourself back in your head, drop back into the body. It can be really helpful to actually touch a part of your body, right? That brings your attention to where you are physically placing your hand. And then the final suggestion I have for you, and this is quite a long list, is pick a time of day to be in silence when your mind is naturally less active. So it could be that moment when you're first waking up, when you're still a little drowsy. It could be late in the day, the mind's kind of tired and it's starting to shut down. Or potentially it's a different time for you. So find a time that your mind is naturally less active and use that time as a time to explore silence. So hopefully there were one or two things in there, that long list, that were useful or intriguing that you will play with and experiment with. And if you feel like it, leave a comment below this video once you've had a chance to experiment and play a little, and let me know what worked, what didn't, or if you have other suggestions or practices that you use that allow you to just let go of the busyness of the mind and drop into silence and stillness. Do leave a comment below and let me and let others in the group know. That would be lovely to hear. So that's all from me today. I look forward to reading your comments, and we'll have one more bonus video for you tomorrow. Thanks very much.